Hello everyone and welcome back to the World Cyber Arena North American Hearthstone Pro Qualifier. My name is TJ Osmo, QD Sanders, once again joined by Kevin Monk Dong, and we just watched a pretty intense matchup between Zalae and Hyped, and Zalae actually moved on to the finals. He put the Grim Patron Warrior. You said it earlier today that you were expecting the Grim Patron Warrior from him. What did you think of that match?
I thought it was pretty one-sided, unfortunately, for Zalae. And that was because the Druid, he didn't draw into his Wild Growth. He didn't draw into any innervates at all. And I'm kind of wishing we saw a more even game, because Grim Patron Warrior, when taken to the extreme, when taken to the late game, it's just really fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of counting going on. You mentioned that it's similar to Math Warrior, because in the late game you have to do a lot of counting to see if you have lethal or not. A lot of time you're close to dead. But we can take a look at what we've seen so far today. We did just watch that match between Zalae and Hyped. Why don't you recap a little bit what we saw earlier as well?
Yeah, Trump, he took out Dart in the first match, and it was really back and forth. Dart, of course, bringing the Clockwork Giant into his decks. Kind of an odd tech choice, because he was expecting Trump to go for Handlock. Unfortunately, that didn't turn his way. Trump brought Zoo instead, and from there on out, it was all downhill. It eventually went on to the final game, but Trump, with a brilliant explosive trap play, he realized his opponent had the potential for lethal, and he just went for it himself. He protected himself and just tried to race his opponent instead of going all the way for lethal on one turn or another. Then we had Zalae versus Hyped as the second match. What happened there?
So, yeah, we talked about Zalae versus Hyped. Both matches actually went to game number 5. So the trend going on today is that we're seeing a pretty long day. So there's a lot on the line for both of these players, Zalae and Trump. For Zalae, he wants to join his teammates. We saw Amaz on Monday qualify for that LAN. We saw Firebat on Tuesday qualify in the LAN. Both Archon players, so they're probably in the house downstairs waiting for him to come down and tell them whether or not he won, or watching the stream themselves. They can rub it in his face if he doesn't make it, or they could all hope for an all Archon LAN qualifier finals if he does make it in, and with their teammate Purple Drank actually playing tomorrow. Trump, on the other hand, I mean, Hearthstone, he's a full-time Hearthstone player. I mean, most of the time he's a streamer. He does stream Arena as well, but he hasn't had a big, successful LAN performance. And I'm sure that's something that he wants to definitely add to his Hearthstone accomplishments.
Oh yeah, certainly. Not only that, if Trump makes it, he will be the second big streamer that will be at WCA. And I'm certain that WCA probably wants a lot of big game names to attend their tournament, get a lot of views. I know Trump and Amaz, they're two of the most viewed viewers in China. So to have these two players go to their LAN, that'll be pretty huge.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll definitely be fun to watch as well. I'm excited if either of these players make it. But we can take a look at their decks on the screen. Of course, we've seen both of these players play so far today. And since they won, we've seen all 3 of their decks. And the first matchup is going to be the Rogue from Zalae, and the Warrior from Trump, which we saw earlier, is that Control Warrior. Pretty standard Control Warrior. Yeah,
Trump, he always brings Control Warrior for the most part into tournaments recently. And it's a very good call, especially against players like the Zalae. Zalae and Hyped, but they both like Rogue. So bringing Warrior against Rogue, probably a really good choice. In addition, he also has Zalae also has Patron Warrior or Patron Warrior. So the Control Warrior from Trump is going to have a favorable matchup there as well.
Yeah, Control Warrior is one of the decks that players say is the best at countering the Grim Patron Warrior. So in that mirror matchup, he will have the advantage. But we'll talk a little bit more about this first matchup here. Going in to the Mulligan, Zalae on the Rogue versus Trump on the Warrior. And this matchup is pretty rough for the Rogue, just because a lot of times the Warrior can gain absurd amounts of health over the course of the game, and Rogues sometimes have a finite amount of damage, especially if a lot of their early momentum is stopped. And so a lot of times Warriors can just outlast the damage that a Rogue can be able to put out.
Yeah, the game plan of the Rogue should be to develop as many sticky minions as possible that the Warrior can't remove, and use those minions to deal damage after damage over the course of a few turns. The game plan of the Warrior should be to use his weapons to remove the early threats of the Rogue, and then to armor up as much as possible so that the Rogue won't be able to burst them down. We already see some key cards from the Rogue though. Even though this is an unfavorable matchup for the Rogue, He has Edwin Van Cleef, and if he's able to get a huge Edwin in one of the early turns and just hit over like 2 or 3 turns,
yeah,
and the warrior doesn't have an execute, he doesn't have like a shield block, shield slam combination, then he's going to be in a pretty good situation. Unfortunately for Zalae, there is an execute, but there isn't yet an activator for that execute, so Zalae still has hope if he wants to go for that huge Van Cleef.
Yeah, the hand for Trump actually isn't that great. I mean, he's got both shield blocks, which is good to cycle through your deck, but he wants something early to be able to either proc the executes, or I'm sure he would rather that be a shield slam, or to contest what's put on the board like an armor smith. So, and it looks like he is going to go for the super aggressive Van Cleef play, hoping that Trump is not going to have the answer.
Yep. In a matchup like this where you're unfavored, you have to take risks. And even putting an 8-8, that's vulnerable to BGH, but
it's like a clockwork giant.
Very good point.
That took you 3 cards to be able to do, and some face damage. So all he's going to be able to do is shield block here.
Dart's looking at this game. He's like, oh my god, why didn't I think of playing Edwin Van Cleef? That's so much better than Clockwork Giant.
Yeah. Well, it does survive, so that means Zalae can confidently think that there is no removal here, and judging by the hand of Trump, it doesn't look like there's going to be removal next turn either, because even if he can shield block into a shield slam, won't be enough armor to take out the Van Cleef, and he won't have enough mana to use both shield slam and execute to proc it. Well, I guess he could armor up, but he would have to draw into it first. He's going to have to use Armor Smith as basically a tool to proc the execute.
It's quite unfortunate. Zalae can even consider sapping this Armor Smith.
Yeah.
Especially since he has 2 saps. I think actually that might be a viable play.
Yeah.
The other option is to dagger up again and double Deadly Poison to clear this Armor Smith.
Mm-hmm.
But I think either way you have to clear the Armor Smith because you are afraid of execute.
Yeah. A lot of times, well, actually sometimes you'll see Armor Smith sap in the late game just to make it so that you can actually win the game with the Blade Flurry play, because the armor actually does apply from the Armor Smith before the face damage would. So, but this early in the game on turn 4, sapping the Armor Smith is a very odd occurrence. If that's the play that he will decide to go for.
Well, you've already taken a risk in going for this big Van Cleef, and with this risk, you want to get the most out of it. So you want to be able to guarantee pretty much that this Edwin Van Cleef survives in future turns. So I think sap could be a very good choice here.
Yeah.
But no, he's going to go, I believe, with the, yeah, it looks like the double Deadly Poison. So the problem with this is it gets punished by Harrison Jones. But if your opponent Harrison Jones on this turn, that means the Edwin Van Cleef will do yet another 8 damage. So this is the exact game plan that the Rogue wants, getting 8 damage every turn. This Edwin Van Cleef's already done 16 damage, and it's looking to do even more.
Now Sap's going to come out and make that 24 damage.
Oh, even a sprint.
At this point, it looks like he might not even need a sprint to be able to deal with this.
Yeah, it looks like a double sap is going to be the key. So, very good decision to save the first sap because of situations exactly like this.
So now he's going to be able to put him at 11 if he does use the sap on this turn, which means that next turn, even if he armors up to 13, unless he can gain health another way, which he does have shield mated, then he would be looking at a lethal situation on turn number 6.
I think at this point you can even just use your dagger up and then re-dagger.
Yeah, use it while you can. Otherwise you'd be floating mana, and you know that 5 damage is most likely going to go into face anyway.
Look at Trump. He's like, oh, am I being punished for something? I have 2 executes, that's exactly the card I need, but I don't have any way to proc it yet again.
Yeah. Oh no.
No, Trump, don't do it.
Well, in the first 8 or so cards, 9 cards, if you see the first sap, you can almost likely not expect the second one, but second one is going to come out, and just like that, Zalae is going to take game number 1 on the shoulders of that Van Cleef.
So yeah, just perfectly. That was the picture-perfect play of the picture-perfect example of how Rogue beats Warrior. You have to kind of like cheese out at Van Cleef. Hope your opponent doesn't have execute plus a procer, and he doesn't have big aim hunter. And it's actually not that unlikely, or rather, not that unlikely, because who keeps execute against Rogue in their opening hand?
That's very true.
Who keeps BGH in their opening hand against Rogue?
Yeah, that's definitely a good point, and you can see that he just didn't draw into any of those. He didn't even give him much time either. He probably went through what, even with the cycle, 11 cards, 10 cards. So I'm sure Zalae is happy that he could actually take a win with that Rogue early on in an unfavorable matchup. So he's going to be pretty confident moving into his next matches. Zalae does have Mage and Hunter still left to win with.
And Warrior. He has Mage and Warrior.
Sorry, sorry. I wrote it down here. I'll cross that out, put Hunter. The Grim Patron Warrior, we had that mistake earlier on.
I think Trump is still okay with that loss because he does have the Warrior to match up against his opponent's Warrior. And, wow, okay, so it's no Warriors are going to be involved in this matchup. It's going to be Trump Zoo deck against Mech Mage, and we talked about this matchup particularly with when Trump brought out Zoo and Zalae brought out Mech Mage in their respective matches, because one of the reasons Mech Mage has kind of gone off the radar is because Zoo is kind of reappeared as the premier aggro deck.
Yeah. When
you want to run an aggro deck, you're like, okay, I have the choice of a Phase Hunter, I have the choice of a Mech Mage, I have the choice of the Zoo. And usually it's the Zoo that has just a better matchup against the field. I think only Mech Mage has a really good, better matchup against Druid, but against the rest of the field, I think Zoo is favored. And especially head-to-head, I think Zoo is favored as well against Mech Mage.
Yeah, they can trade up a lot of the times, and when you have a card draw mechanic built into your class against another aggro matchup, that usually will go into your favor. But it's not quite as lopsided as you might think. There are times when the Mech Mage can just get a pretty explosive start, and if the Warlock is tapping, they're just getting closer to that burn that the Mech Mage can have in their hand. So I do think that once again, going to this matchup, Trump's deck does have a little bit of an advantage, but we've seen that doesn't really matter sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you can just draw the nuts. Your opponent doesn't have a response, and you're like, okay, this Van Cleef is hitting me 4 times in the face to kill me.
Yeah, that's very true. And, I mean, it's a really smart play by Trump, too, to sort of switch things up. I'm sure Zalae, I've been talking to a lot of players lately about what they think about Conquest and what they think about the whole situation of trying to predict what you think your opponent's going to do. And I'm sure Zalae was predicting that Trump would just stay with the same deck, because it does have some strong matchups. It would have a strong matchup against Grim Patron Warrior as well. And not the best matchup against Mech Mage, but it's okay. So he threw out the Mech Mage there, hoping that he'd get a beneficial matchup. And Trump read it and went with the Zoo.
Yeah, at least this looks to be a pretty good start for the Zoo. He has the coin, and I think in aggro matchups, you usually want the coin. Not only that, he has double Flame Imp to start it off.
He's got a lot of just really solid creatures and a nice curve as well. He can double Flame Up on turn 1, Haunted Creeper turn 2, Imp Gang Boss on turn 3. And Haunted Creeper and Imp Gang Boss are just so hard to deal with, just because they're so hard to remove. A lot of times you just want to ignore them because they're so annoying. The more damage you have, the damage sources you put in the Imp Gang Boss, the more value that card gets.
Yeah, especially with against the variety of 2/3s and 1/2s that the Mech Mage has, Imp Gang Boss usually it just gets a lot of value. And we're looking at another reason. Okay, so Zoo is favored in this matchup not only because they can trade up against Mech Mage a lot of times, but also Zoo tends to just curve better usually because they have more 1 and 2 drops. And we're seeing that being shown right here. Also, Mirror Entity not very good against Zoo.
Yeah, usually they can just throw in a sandbag. You don't really want to give him an Imp Gang Boss, though. So Spectral Spider, definitely going to come out here.
Yeah, I think Trump would have maybe chosen to play the Imp Gang Boss if he didn't draw into the Void Caller, but now he has a turn 4 play.
Yeah, turn 4 play, and he actually has really great follow-up to the Void Caller as well. Either way, it's going to pull something, and Imp Gang Boss or Doomguard would both be really great choices if that Void Caller is dealt with.
Yeah, even though you gave your opponent a Haunted Creeper, basically the Zoo is much better at utilizing the Haunted Creeper than the Mech Mage. Zoo has Defender of Argus, it has Abusive Sergeant, Power Overwhelming, Void, what's the one that's...
Void Terror?
Void Terror, yes. Meanwhile, what does Mech Mage have to synergize with that? Whirling Blades, perhaps?
Yeah, Whirling Blades. Or the armor plating. Or they could stealth it with the Cloak Field.
Yeah, lots of synergy there.
Or just return it to their hand. And add a 31st card to their deck.
Yep, pretty good. So, you kind of want to save this Clockwork Gnome for the Blast Mage activation.
Yeah.
And I think this is, he's doing this just to set up that activation. I wonder if Trump will read into that and maybe possibly play Imp Gang Boss here. Still, I think the Void Caller is just overall such a stronger play.
Yeah, because, I mean, chances are you might get a Void Caller on the board, or sorry, an Imp Gang Boss on the board anyway. With 2 already in his hand.
I don't know. I don't think the chances of Goblin Blast Mage hitting the Void Caller
3 times?
Yeah, 3 or 4 times in a row is that huge.
Pretty unlikely.
Plus, I think Zalae will almost certainly trade his spider into one of his opponent's spiders here, just to maximize the Blast Mage value. Blast Mage is the key card in this matchup because it's really the only way for Mech Mage to board clear or kind of use as a crowd control mechanic.
But also, it's kind of tough to use the card in this matchup. Because a lot of times you will be faced with like an Imp Gang Boss on turn 3, and sometimes if your Goblin Blast Mage throws a couple shots into the Imp Gang Boss, then you're left with a bigger board than what you started with.
Yeah.
But if you do manage to get a good Goblin Blast Mage on a turn where there's no liability like the Imp Gang Boss on the board, then it can swing the game in your favor. But at 4 health on a 4-drop that doesn't spawn anything else is actually pretty weak because a lot of, you talked about it earlier, a lot of the Zoo creatures can trade up. Just an Abusive Sergeant on something with 2 attack. Or like a Power Overwhelming on one of these Spectral Spiders could trade into it and just gives the Zoo Warlock so much momentum.
Yeah, let's see what these blasts hit. Good, good. Okay, pretty good. It didn't hit the Void Caller at all, which is exactly what I think he wanted.
Yeah. So I like maybe tap play Imp Gang Boss and then hope you get a Doom Guard out of this by trading into this Goblin Blast Mage.
Yeah, I think Implosion is also fairly tempting here, but it just doesn't fit the curve that well.
Yeah, you float a mana, and what would you actually Implosion?
Well, you would Implosion the Blast Mage because that's pretty much the only valid target.
Well, but yeah, I guess so. The only thing that I'm thinking about is the potential for wasted damage. Because what if you roll if you roll like a 2, like the mid range? I guess either way you have wasted damage.
All right, how esports is
Whoa!
Trump? Trump is the definition of esports.
The
honestly.
definition.
Because you know what, Trump is he was the very first. He was the very first professional Hearthstone player, and that's why he's esports enough to roll 4s on implosions.
Yeah, and you can see Zalae gives him a little thumbs up. He's like, that's revenge for the Edwin Van Cleef.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the only way for Zalae to deal with this board is with a second Goblin Blast Mage, which he doesn't have.
Wow, a handful of demons. You could have an endless supply of demons. I actually had a game earlier where I summoned a Void Caller from a Bane of Doom. My opponent killed my Void Caller, and it summoned another Void Caller from my hand. And then he killed that Void Caller on the same turn, and it summoned my other Void Caller from my hand.
Wow.
Just the infinite loop of Void Callers in a single turn.
You know, I thought of if Web Spinner always got Web Spinner, you could basically like, it's like if you played a Tundra Rhino on the board, you could just like shoot out bullets of Web Spinners into your opponent.
Yep. It's like the Hunter class challenge from Naxxramas.
Now this is an interesting board, interesting situation. The Dr. Boom contested Doom Guard, but these Boombots are almost liabilities because they can, if they hit either the Imp Gang bosses, it can even spawn even more 1/1s, which the Mech Mage it can't deal with at all.
He's got quite a bit of damage here on the board.
Not sure why he wouldn't just tap here first.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what these bombs hit.
He actually thought about throwing his 1/1s in for damage, just in case they got hit by the bots, that he didn't waste any of these points of damage. But he went for it anyway. A little bit weird sequencing on this play for Trump.
Yeah.
Now he taps.
Yeah, so now he can actually clear the Doctor Boom fairly easily, and the resulting board will be fairly strong as well. And yet again, like, this might not, like, there's not that much power on the board, but despite that, like, Mech Mage has no way to deal with it. It doesn't really have AoEs.
Yeah, everything is just trading up as well. Like, most of these imps, a couple of these imps came from the implosion, but I mean, even if they came from the implosion, you basically use that 4-mana spell to kill a 4-mana creature and then put all those imps on the board. So
yeah.
Well played.
Now, yeah, pretty much no options, and
all right,
Zalae is forced to give up. It's, you know what I just noticed? Like, Blizzard in this expansion, they're very obsessed with making creatures that spawn other creatures, like the Grim Patron and the Imp Gang boss. And it reminds me a little bit about if you follow StarCraft, kind of like the Swarm Host or the Brood Lords.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you follow StarCraft even deeper, it kind of reminds you of like that's basically what people complain about when they watch StarCraft, just endless spawning minions that kind of like draw out the game, and your opponent just can't win. You lock your opponent out of the game.
So all the StarCraft players that were fed up with Swarm Host and went over to Hearthstone, they play their first game of Hearthstone and it's against a Zoo Warlock, and they run into Imp Gang boss.
Yeah.
And they throw their hands in the air and they thought they were done with it, but nope. The infinite spawning of creatures is
basically the Swarm Host Locust have traveled across games into Hearthstone.
Yeah. And Zoo Warlock is basically the Zerg of Hearthstone, as we both know. But Trump is going to tie it up 1-1 and takes the win with that Zoo Warlock. So Grim Patron Warrior is still left to see from Zalae. Also, he's still going to have to find a win with that Mech Mage. It took him a couple tries in the last series as well. Trump, on the other hand, does have
Warrior
and Hunter left to win.
Yeah, it's actually really good that Trump won there, because I believe Patron Warrior, one of its best matchups actually is against Zoo.
Yeah.
Because Zoo can't, like, they can't really play around Grim Patron plus Warsong Commander. They're always going to have, like, 1/1s on the field at all times. So if Patron Warrior with, like, Unstable Ghouls, Whirlwinds, it can survive to turn 8, and it gets a Warsong Commander into Grim Patron off, it's pretty much game over for there. Just like it was game over when it got that combo off against Druid.
Yeah, one of the ways that Zoo wins that is just to have some overwhelming amount of pressure early on, which usually Control Warrior stops that by brawling, but a lot of times these Grim Patron Warriors don't put that into their deck. So it is going to be that Warrior versus Warrior matchup, and this matchup favors Trump a little bit. That Control Warrior, heavy Control Warrior, does do really well against Grim Patron.
Yeah, sometimes the Warrior can just armor up, or rather the Control Warrior can just armor up so far that the Patron Warrior can't deal enough damage to burst the Control Warrior down. That being said, for example, there are situations where it's really hard for the Control Warrior even to deal with the Patron Warriors, Grim Patrons, if they come in the field.
Yeah.
For example, if the Control Warrior has a Death Spite equipped, he can't actually use it to clear Patrons, because it'll just spawn more Patrons.
It's like a swipe, effectively. Yeah, they have some additional tools as opposed to the Druid matchup, which we saw was, at least the match we saw today was really one-sided. Brawl is a big thing. If you have a really dangerous board full of Grim Patrons, you can brawl and usually be able to clear that and stop that momentum. And if you can stop the momentum, the first big push of Grim Patrons, then a lot of times, like you said, you'll be able to armor up outside of the range of the rest of the combo. So we'll have to see how that's going to play out. Trump's deck is very standard for Control Warrior. I did see some players taking in double Brawl over the course of the weekend. Mainly to counter Zoo, I think, but it also does really well against Grim Patron Warrior.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think Trump is the kind of guy to tech in double Brawl. He's a very standard, tried and true type of player.
Yeah.
He'll go with decks that he knows are really great, and maybe not too experimental decks. Like, that's probably one of the reasons he isn't getting into the Patron Warrior as fast as some other players, like Zalae, for instance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. Trump's a very vanilla constructed player.
And I think if I had to pick any Hearthstone card that represented Zalae, it would have to be the Frothing Berserker that we can see 2 of in his hand.
Yeah, he actually puts that in his Control Warrior when he sort of made a name for himself in the ESL Legendary Series. He made popular Frothing Berserker in that matchup. And when the first time I asked him, why do you put that in your deck? He told me, why not? I was like, great answer.
Wow.
Great answer. He eventually explained it to me a little more, like he wanted more like that sort of early mid-game threat that can match up against some things, but the why not answer was my favorite.
Yeah, I like this play. Basically like avoiding Death Spite. And Trump is going to have issues if he plays the Acolyte of Pain into this Frothing Berserker. I mean, he's going to draw more cards, but he's also going to give his opponent a pretty angry Frothing Berserker.
Yeah, Trump is having nightmares here where there's a potential for a very large creature on the board that he just does not have an answer to.
And from our perspective, we know that if Trump plays the Acolyte of Pain, 2 Frothing Berserkers will actually come to the field.
Yeah, one of the big cards in this matchup, or in just Grim Patron Warrior alone against all matchups, is the Emperor Thaurissan. We've talked about it over the past couple days, but Emperor Thaurissan really improves combo decks. Freeze Mage, Druid, to an extent the Rogue. But Grim Patron Warrior falls under that category, and being able to make those power plays like you talked about earlier on turn 8, 1 or 2 turns earlier, if you get the reduced cost on Grim Patron and Warsong Commander, for example, can really win you games that you would have otherwise not won without that card in your deck.
Yeah. I think the main benefit of Emperor, though, and Patron Warrior is not getting the combo out earlier, but adding additional pieces to the combo, like Warsong Commander, plus the Grim Patron, plus you can throw in some Whirlwind, possibly some Unstable Ghouls in there, maybe even a Frothing Berserker just to go for lethal.
It's very true, very true.
Now, like you said, the key card here is the Brawl, and I don't think it's, right now, it's not, the situation isn't dangerous enough for him to consider Brawl now, but it's good for, it's good to have. You know, in the back of Trump's mind, he has like a safety net.
Yeah, he's trying to think though, is he in a lot of danger yet? He's trying to think of what possibilities, if I play Sludge Belcher this turn, are there for Zalae to really capitalize on it. He's thinking, what could come down on turn 5 that could punish me? And it looks like he's just going to hold out. Playing the Sludge Belcher, he could end up taking more damage than he would have if he just armors up, because of the fact that Zalae can throw damage into the Sludge Belcher and increase the strength of the Frothing Berserkers. So in a way, he's actually gaining more health by just armoring up and not playing the Sludge Belcher.
Yeah, that's true. Though, this is kind of, like, Zalae can kind of make the read that Brawl possibly is in Trump's hand at this moment from that play. And if he does that, I think he's perfectly fine with just not committing more to the board, and just, he's happy with just dealing 6 damage to the face every single turn. This is also good. If he does this, maybe I wouldn't even play the Dread Corsair.
Oh, no. Just because, like you said, it's pretty telegraphed that he has Brawl. And, I mean, he's still putting on damage, and he's putting on pressure, because if that Death Bite lands on the face next turn, if he can play a couple more creatures also, then that could just be game right there, because those Frothing Berserkers could become quite strong. And there is a potential here, yeah, for him to make a big turn. Oh, wow, he's going to take so much damage.
Oh, Warsong Commander. So, I think this might be a turn where, even though you know your opponent doesn't, he might have Brawl, you might just go for the Emperor anyway. Because if you go for the Emperor, all your cards in your hand will be reduced, and you already have a Warsong Commander and a Grim Patron in your hand, so reducing both those cards is really nice. Are you...
That might be lethal.
Okay, let's take a look.
He can play Warsong Commander, Dread Corsair, Acolyte of Pain. So that's 7 creatures on the board. These Frothing Berserkers will each gain 7 attack. So they'll be at 9 each. So that's 18, plus 2 from the Nova Vendor, 20. plus 4 from the Despite. That's
24.
24. Plus the
Plus-
3 damage from the Dread Corsair and the 1 damage from the Acolyte of Pain. It's 28 damage.
Okay, I think he sees it. Wait.
No?
No, he doesn't see it. Wow.
I'm almost positive I counted that right.
You did it very meticulously, too.
Because 7 creatures on the board, right? Those Frothing Berserkers would both gain 7 attack each.
Yes.
I
Wow.
think that's a miss lethal.
Very possible. TJ with the excellent Grim Patron Warrior play. I know you have been playing a lot of this deck ladder lately.
Yeah.
I think the problem is when you're under this much pressure.
I think you might realize.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have been just a Despite hit to the face, plus a charge from the Dread Corsair.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, the problem is when you're under this much pressure, it's kind of hard to do math at this point. I mean, I say that like almost facetiously, but yeah, now that the Frothing Berserker has survived, it doesn't really matter.
He still wins.
Yeah, he still wins. So not really, just no miss lethal, just hilarious BM.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Chances are he was going to win that game anyway. He had Warsong Commander, plus the Grim Patron combo, plus double Whirlwind. And, I mean, we saw right there, Trump was at 7 health. So there wasn't really much of a way. He did have double Sludge Belcher, but it was looking super grim for him at that point. So Zalae is going to go out to a 2-1 lead.
Yeah, kind of unfortunate for Trump. But in both the Control Warrior games where he lost, he kind of drew somewhat poorly. In the first game against Rogue, he couldn't deal with the Edwin, and in the second game, he just couldn't deal with the Frothing Berserker. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what Control Warrior gives you. If you don't draw your opening answers to threats, like it kind of snowballs, and your opponent's minions can just kind of get recursive damage onto your face until I guess he combos you out with Frothing Berserkers.
Yeah, and it's so crazy to think that just those 2 Frothing Berserkers, how much pressure they put out just by being on the board there with the Despite up. And just crazy amounts of damage you can put out in a single turn with that deck. So, and that wasn't even with Grim Patrons. That was just, that could have been any Warrior deck doing that.
I do feel, though, that Trump might have played slightly greedy in the previous game. For example, not throwing a Sludge Belcher onto the board early on.
Yeah.
Because he did that, Zalae had a kind of like a free turn to develop a Death Spite. Yeah. And not only did that Death Spite, it did 4 damage to Trump's face, but it also had the potential to just use the Whirlwind effect to buff the Frothing Berserker. So, and that's in that respect, Trump might have just played into his own death by armoring on turn 5.
Yeah, that's a good point. But we are moving on to this next match here. It is going to be Trump with the Hunter, and Zalae just has to find a win with the Mech Mage. He has 2 opportunities to do so, and he has to do it against Trump's Hunter and Trump's Warrior. 2 matchups that can be pretty tough for Mech Mage.
Yeah, I would say they're probably close to 50-50, though.
For both, yeah.
Yeah, so right now, if we just take those percentages, I guess Zalae has a 75% chance of joining his teammates, Firebat and Maz, at the WCA America Finals.
Crunching the numbers, yeah. So we'll have to see as we move into this match. Now, the key cards in this match are Snow Chugger and a Noyotron against the Face Hunter. Just because if you get those cards early on, a lot of times you can stop so much of the Face Hunter's momentum that it'll just block him out of the game. Yeah.
The Noyotron is a card that no matter when you draw it, it's going to be good. Because even as a 1-2 taunt, your opponent usually they have to use an Iron Miguel on it, and that's still a really good tempo trade for you.
Yeah, I remember looking back, a lot of players were, when they were making the rankings for ranking the GVG cards, they were saying a Noyotron actually wasn't going to be that good. But it ended up being, I mean, it's not at the top of people's list when they think of super impactful GVG cards. But in most decks that run any sort of mech synergy, Noyotron's always at the top of the list.
Yeah, that's true. I have done polls, and even now, I don't think people rate a Noyotron as a top 20 card. But in mech decks, like you said, it's really impactful.
Yeah.
So a really good opening from the Mech Mage. Usually the Hunter is more consistent with his opening, so this can kind of be more. This kind of opening from Trump can kind of be more expected.
He's got to really think of this turn 1 play here.
I like just saving the coin because next turn, you might want to coin out the Eagle Horn Bow against the various 2/3s that your opponent can have.
Yeah, Snow Chugger or Mech Warper. Because throwing down is basically whether or not he wants to have Abusive Sergeant to match the next threat, or if he wants to have Eagle Horn Bow to match the next threat. And 9 times out of 10, Eagle Horn Bow is going to be the one that you want.
Yeah, just like you said, a Neurotron is going to do a lot of work here, unless an owl is top decked.
Yeah.
Arcing Golem, probably...
It's not an owl.
It's not an owl.
Probably not an owl. Mad Scientist, though, is a pretty decent card in this matchup, but it's not as good in this matchup as it would be against other aggro matchups. Just because a lot of the Mech Mage cards are out of that range. You see a lot of them have more health than they do attack, like Spider Tank, Snow Chugger, Mech Warper. None of those are too much affected by Explosive Trap, which we've seen quite a bit of Trump's Hunter deck. I think it's just 2 Explosive Traps, no Snake Trap or Freezing Trap.
Yeah, if it's indeed 2 Explosive Traps, it's actually going to be pretty horrible for Trump. I mean, this board can deal with both the Mad Scientist and the Explosive Trap. And then just the Spider Tank can be thrown down.
Yeah. The one poor thing for Zalae's hand here is that he actually doesn't curve out too well if we consider the fact that he's going up against a Face Hunter.
Oh, slightly too late.
Yeah. Zalae is really going to need a turn 4 play, a solid turn 4 play.
Is he really, though? I think Trump is probably in more trouble. Like, Trump doesn't have any solid plays in the next few turns, to be honest. And if Trump plays the Arcing Golem here, then I guess Zalae doesn't need a solid turn, or 4 mana play, rather.
I guess armor plating is good enough. Or he might just even have the extra mana to play Lothep. This is so tough.
Oh, I'm not really sure about this. It's very aggressive, but I think giving Mech Mage extra mana is just so... It gives us just so many more options. Like, we see Zalae, he was probably going to Hero Power the previous turn, but now he can play, well, now he can play both Mirror Entity and Hero Power, or Lothep.
Yep. Which one would be better in this scenario? I'm sort of leaning towards the Lothep.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
What to do?
Lothep might not interrupt too many plays that would follow the next turn, though. You think about a Hunter's turn 4 play. It's usually either a 2-drop and a weaved-in Hero Power, or just 2 2-drops.
Well, if you think about what spells the Hunter has, it's pretty much just Quick Shot and Kill Command. And I guess Unleash, yeah. But and your opponent probably is going to use any of those cards in the next few turns. So the Lothep's effect of increasing the mana cost of spells actually wouldn't be too useful, and you're just probably playing it for the 5/5. Especially the 5 attack, which is just more threatening to your opponent, and it can allow you to race more.
Yeah, it looks like Lothep is going to be the choice here.
The other thing you have to consider is... Okay. The other thing you have to consider is Mirror Entity is just generally really bad in this matchup. Because usually what you Mirror Entity is charge creatures, and you basically get like Magma Ragers. Worse Magma Ragers that only do 3 attack instead of the 5 almighty 5 attack of the Magma Rager.
Yeah, when your opponent has already gotten value out of that card, you're basically just trading into it without actually getting that charge benefit for yourself.
So, Zalae took 2 extra damage here by not clearing the Arcing Golem. We're going to see if that really affects anything here.
He does have a pretty sick combo here with Knife Juggler Unleash the Hounds. It already has the weapon equipped. There's a lot of damage that's going to be staring back at Zalae.
What to do?
Even though Zalae had a pretty strong start with the Clockwork Dome and the Neurotron, it's still the value of like Mad Scientist and just extra damage to faces kind of catching up on him. And I'm not sure if he can race at this point, even though he has a Fireball. It's just that he's 15 points in health behind Trump at this point, and he kind of has to clear this Arcing Golem somehow.
Yeah, he's sitting at a point where he'll need, at the least, like 3 or 4 turns to kill him. Where he's sitting on 13 health, it's very realistic that Trump could kill him in the next 2 turns. All right,
Okay.
trades in with the spider tank. I like this.
Yeah, just a very standard play, but it's still looking fairly desperate for Zalae at the moment.
Armor plating his own face to try and heal himself.
Nice try,
on.
Zalae.
Nice try.
It should work. It should give yourself 1 armor, right? That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious as to why he went for this play, giving his Lotheb 1 more health instead of pinging the face. I'm not sure what that does, actually.
Yeah, and this is such a rough situation because you're so low health at this stage in the game that you can't afford to leave things on the board, but you're also in a situation where in order to win, you need to race. So you have to find a balance between what you need to clear and what damage you need to put into face to be able to win the game.
Yeah, exactly. And Trump knows that, so he's going to make it as awkward as possible for Zalae to clear the board.
Yeah.
I mean, this board doesn't look too threatening, especially if you clear off the knife juggler, but that's just 2 extra damage to the face that you can't take, especially if your opponent has kill command. That's interesting, but unfortunately irrelevant.
Yeah. And in this situation, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I thought it was a great point about no matter when you draw an Oiltron in this game, it's going to have value. So second Anoratron, if that comes out on the next turn, that could block enough damage to be able to secure him the game.
Yeah. Well, that being said, there is an Iron Beak Owl in Trump's hand.
Yeah.
And wow, that's really interesting that Trump, unfortunately, he didn't draw into lethal. And how much damage is on the board right now? Too much, actually. With the fireball,
Yeah.
that's going to be it.
Is there any way that he could get a good juggle onto the Leper Gnome to win? No, I don't think so. If he knife juggler Leper Gnomes and takes 2 damage, he would still be 1 off lethal if the juggle from the bomb hits the Leper Gnome. And he can't owl as well, hoping for another juggler. I do think this is it. I don't see a way out. Archon just might have secured their 3rd player out of 3.
Yeah, Trump is actually probably regretting this knife juggler Unleash the Hounds play. If he didn't Unleash the Hounds here, it would be almost certainly lethal. And yeah, I think with this line of play, he's just going to almost give up here.
He has to just hope that there's no points of direct damage in the hand, because there's 16 damage, I believe, staring at him from the board, plus the ping. No fireball, no frostbolt. There is a chance, but we can both see that's going to be it. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Zalae's going to take it. He takes Group C, and he's going to join. He's going to be the 3rd Archon player to attend the WCA America Finals.
That is crazy. I'm sure Archon and Amaz is very happy to be already be joined by 2 of his teammates following suit. And Trump, I mean, we've got to hand it to Trump. He played very well today. He won his first series, made it far enough to make it to those finals. But Zalae, I think he brought a fantastic lineup here. A lot of players were thinking about Freeze Mage as one of the biggest contenders for that Mage slot, and putting in cards like the Kazan Mystic that are sort of like blanket picks for both Hunter and Freeze Mage. Not as good against Mech Mage. It's not as impactful, but very well played by Zalae.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Very interesting to note that all 3 Archon players, even though they all advanced from their respective groups, they all brought slightly different decks to suit their own personalities. So
yeah.
It wasn't only a team effort, but just the individual skill, the individual decisions, which prompted them to advance from their groups.
Yeah, they didn't have too much crossover in their decks, which is a cool thing to note. But let's take a look at what we actually saw today. If we can pull up the bracket. Dart versus Trump was the first match of the day, and that was a pretty good one.
Yeah, of course, the highlight being the Clockwork Giant, which unfortunately Dart didn't really use to the extreme. It baited out a BGH, but after that, it was essentially kind of like a dead card that you probably would have wanted either like a Ysera for to replace it. Then we had Zalae versus Hyped, also an interesting one between 2 players who really favor Rogue. And unfortunately for Hyped, it was the Patron Warrior that finished off the game, and Hyped just drew so poorly with the Druid that Patron Warrior was able to secure it so easily.
Yeah, on like turn 6. And then of course we did see Zalae in that final match, securing his spot in that qualifier land final, which is going to be at the beginning of June, joining Amaz and Firebat. We actually have one more day of that qualifier to determine the last player So we take a look at what's happened so far this week and what we'll be seeing tomorrow. Purple Drank, another Archon player in that Thursday group. They do have the potential to have an all-Archon LAN final.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite group because not only do we get a possibility of a 4th Archon player advancing, we get Strife Pro, one of my favorite players, and of course, we get one of the biggest rivalries in Hearthstone, Chalky versus Reynad.
Yeah, that should be a really interesting matchup. We'll have to see if they are going to match them in the first round or be paired up at all, but if they do, I'm certain that's going to be a fantastic matchup. Make sure you guys are letting us know your predictions or what you thought of the games, what you think of that 3 Archon in that final so far. Use the hashtag WCA 2015, and make sure you follow us, WCA_America, to find out more information about all of the World Cyber Arena Hearthstone with schedules, brackets, maybe information about the LAN final in December as well. And you can also find out more information about the World Cyber Arena Heroes of the Storm. You can find out more information about Crossfire as well and Dota 2. So make sure you tune in there. So, Monk, do you have any final thoughts before we let these viewers go about the day today?
Well, I think the highlight of the day, of course, probably was that Patron Warrior that did so well against basically all the decks. I believe it won 2 matches in a row, in fact, and it was just really exciting to watch. Watching a lot of get-in-heres, right? It's a very underrated deck, and I hope to be seeing more of it because it's just slightly different from all the mid-range decks that we've seen, or the face decks, or the aggro decks.
Yeah, for sure. It was an exciting day of games, and that's going to do it from all of us here at the World Cyber Arena. For myself, from Monk, we do have one more game of matches tomorrow. It is going to be the final day of the World Cyber Arena qualifiers. We'll be back at 5 p.m. tomorrow, so tune in then. Thanks for watching, and have a good night.